Hello and welcome to part 2 of our video about building the Peco turntable kit. In our previous video we showed you how we painted and prepared all the components for assembly. If you haven't seen that video, click the link above now. In this video we'll be showing you how we assembled the kit, how we motorised it and how we installed it on our model railway layout. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to our channel. Time to assemble it. I'm not going to show you this in too much detail because I think the instructions are really clear. To assemble the kit, I used Gorilla Super Glue. This dries very quickly and is quite easy to use. I found it useful to use the tweezers to hold the contact springs down whilst inserting the rails. And here I used a needle to apply the super glue to the bottoms of the railings. Capillary action draws the glue underneath and holds everything in just the right place. Check all the moving parts move freely. And here's the finished turntable deck. At this point I decided it needed a little bit more weathering. So I used the same pastel technique that I showed you in the previous video and applied my homemade weathering powders with a soft bristle brush and blended them with my finger. I also applied some rust effects to the underside of the bridge. And here is the finished turntable bridge. The next instruction is to assemble the turntable well, but I've already done this because I wanted to paint it before putting it all together. So I'm going to skip that instruction, set the well to one side for now, and I'm going to assemble the bearing and its electronic components. This just clips together. And then the bearing needs gluing into the bottom of the turntable well. Then I cut some Metcalf pre-printed brick sheets into thin strips to build the turntable well walls. I pre-weathered these before gluing them in place, and I used the pastel to colour the edges of the card where white was showing through, to try and make the joins a little less obvious. Then I glued these into the side of the turntable well. I took some time over this. It's really important to get this as neat as you can. You don't want any gaps between the cardboard and the plastic of the turntable. Firstly, they'll be very obvious and won't look very nice, but also if the card isn't tight to the wall, it will obstruct the movement of the turntable bridge. So it's worth taking a little while over this, going around very slowly, bit by bit, and making sure it's glued in very tightly. These pre-sprung clips are extremely useful for this kind of job. You could also use clothes pegs. I used the pastel again to try and disguise the joins between the strips of the brick sheets. This was probably the part of the construction that I was least satisfied with it, as I can still see the joins. If you have any suggestions of how I could hide these better, please do let me know in the comments. Finally, I put on another coat of weathering powders right round the bottom of the turntable well to try and show where the damp has gathered. Then it was time to solder the wires on for the electronics. These two wires take the bus current to the rails in the turntable itself, so you can run locos on them. Finally, it's time to fit the turntable bridge into the well. Check all the parts move freely and that it turns well. Before turning it over and gluing this final ring on the back, which will hold all the deck and everything together. Once this is glued in place, there's no going back, so be sure that this is set up right before you glue it in, and then wait for it to dry. I used a locomotech motor to motorise my turntable. This was relatively easy to install and came with clear, easy to read, detailed instructions. The only part that was tricky was inserting this drive spindle into the turntable bridge.
Fixing the joining pole into the turntable itself was extremely difficult and required a lot of force. I did it in the end off camera because it was so stressful, and this is a technique I use of balancing the turntable bridge on a piece of wood and then gently smashing it with a hammer. But I did it, here I am recreating it for the purposes of drama and for the video, and eventually it went in sufficiently far. It was incredibly stressful, and I was terrified I was going to break the turntable.
The instructions provided with the kit suggest that you install the drive rod into that part of the turntable kit before you build the kit. I didn't see this until I had built the kit, so if you're trying this project, I suggest you do that, and it may save you some stress with installing that part. This collar attaches the motor drive shaft to the turntable bridge. The motor attaches very easily to the bottom of the turntable well, and these spacers tension the arms. I glued these in place with polystyrene cement, which makes a very solid bond between different plastics. Then it was time to test the whole setup with an old 12-volt train set controller. And lo and behold, it worked. This was a most satisfying moment. Then I soldered connecting wires to the motor. It's much easier to do this when it's on your workbench than when it's installed in your model railway layout. I removed the old turntable from the existing hole we'd created. If you want to see how we made this hole, please see Model Railway Update 9. And then the new turntable just slotted into place. And of course, I had to turn a locomotive on it straight away. Tornado had the honour of being the first loco on the turntable. Just a quick look underneath at the finished installation. You can see the turntable motor here. It does stick out quite a long way below the board, but I've got plenty of space under here, so that's fine. The motor feed just connected here to this output from the old Hornby 12-volt train set controller, which is just on the front of the control panel at the moment. I'll probably tidy that up and make it look more elegant later. And then the track wires just connect to my track bus nest over here. So this is the old Hornby 12-volt train set controller I'm using to turn the turntable. To make the turntable at the right height relative to all our track bed and everything else, we need to raise it slightly above the level of the plywood base. So we've just got these very thin strips cut from this foam, which is what we've been using to ballast our, to underlay our sidings, not to ballast it.
And I'm just going to tuck this in around the edge of the turntable, and the turntable's on and wait. I've put a bead of glue along the bottom of it. It's going to hold that in place while it dries. I'm not quite ready to fix the turntable into place yet, but that is going to hold the turntable at the right height.
And that just about brings us to the end of this video on the Peco turntable kit. We still plan to do a bit more work bedding the turntable in with the rest of the scenery of the motive power depot and the goods shed area when that scenery is done. But for now, we're going to leave you with a few clips of some of our steam locomotives running on and off the turntable and turning round.
I don't think the turntable's quite lined up right yet, so I'm going to take it a bit slower. Good job.
If you found this video useful, please do consider subscribing to our channel. And check back again soon for more model railway updates. It doesn't get much better than that.